I'm waiting to connect over here. Oh, and now I've connected on YouTube. I'm really getting the coordination of this down so that I can simultaneously maybe launch on both sites. Um, Welcome to the last studio stream of 2020. I could not be more excited to be done with this year. I don't labor under any misconception that I think that anything's going to change really per se with the transition from one numerical value of year to another. But you know, it's symbolic, and we really are hopefully looking at a year of hope and possibility in 2021, where, you know, we're seeing the rollout of vaccines across the U.S. and across the world, and there's a change in our leadership, which seems to bring with it a change in how our country as a unified nation is going to be addressing the pandemic. So I have hope. I'm excited about 2021. I see that there's a little black sequin here on this table that's left over from, I did a video, an unboxing video that went up on my channel on Monday of a donation that was sent to me from a good friend of mine. Well, I won't say a good friend per se, in that she and I have only lived in the same city for a very brief time when we both lived in Boston, but we're friends. I would say we're friends. And she had some extra supplies that she was deaccessioning from her fashion line workshop, and that she wondered if we wanted any hair canvas, and I said yes. So she sent me this wonderful box, which, that's all to say that if you want to watch that unboxing video, it just went up on Monday on my YouTube channel, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in that. But this sequin that I just found on my work table here in this stream is a black sequin from, there was a piece of antique mourning beadwork that was, oh, hey, welcome. I see there's a couple of people showing up in Instagram now. I see Trisha, and I see, looks like Catherine maybe. Hi. I found a sequin lying on my table here. That was a black sequin that must have fallen off of this very beautiful piece that was recently donated to our study collection. Well, it was sent to me, and I think it should go in our study collection, of some 19th century Victorian mourning embroidery. There's beadwork, seed beads, and there's sequins, and it's a really lovely piece. So that's part of that unboxing video. If you want to check it out, you can't really see it too well in that video though, because it's like this kind of setup. But that was a recent acquisition that I'm excited about. So in today's stream, mostly I want to work on applying the trim to the Regency bonnet. But first, I had a very momentous day yesterday where I was able to return to the studio at the theater, at the department on campus, the drama department, for the first time in maybe not 6 months, but definitely since, I believe I was last there in either late July or early August to film some content for my fall class that needed to be filmed on site. And so I went in yesterday, partly with a sense of not, I don't want to ascribe it to anxiety or paranoia, but I knew that the risk would be as low as possible because it's the week between Christmas and New Year's. Like, there's nobody on campus. There's nobody, and not literally nobody, but you know, there's hardly anyone going into those buildings in this window in time. So I thought, well, that's the least amount of risk for me as a high-risk person to be on campus filming some stuff. And I was filming content. My spring class is a dye class. And I have a notice I need to get rid of on my desktop because it's obscuring the chat for Instagram. I'm teaching a dye class in the spring, and it's online asynchronous delivery with the students are capable of signing up for time in the dye facility. I just need to convey to them information that I won't be there to supervise. There will be other people, two others supervising. So I needed to record some of the demonstration videos on things like how to safely raise and lower this drying rack that is like basically clotheslines that go up and down over the sinks they're on a line like a sail on a ship, and you belay them on a cleat on the wall. And I needed to illustrate that. Like, I can't talk somebody through that. I need to show them how to do that. So I was there yesterday, and it was a wonderful experience in that it was so lovely to be back in that space. It has been mostly renovated. I think there's still a few things left to happen, but they used the opportunity of the much reduced capacity and the cancellation of theatrical shows happening in the theater to do some renovations in the space, particularly in our costume shop and my crafts facilities. And it was great to I've seen pictures of it, but it was great to be in it and see what it's like now. It's I gotta say, it's really nice. And while I was there, I picked up a bag of stuff that this is my studio time. The first thing I need to do is unpack this bag, which it's actually, Trisha is in, the woman who runs this business, Pattern Seamstress. I see that she's she's watching on Instagram right now. And this is a bag for one of Trisha's businesses, the name under which she does costumes for all different kinds of shows, a lot of touring shows like Blue Man Group and Cirque du Soleil, touring companies, and also casinos and theme parks and magicians and acrobats and all kinds of exciting stuff. So, but that business is obviously kind of on hiatus right now, as I understand it, because there isn't a lot of live theater. But she also teaches the name she's using on Instagram, Creative Costume Academy. She also teaches online pattern drafting classes that are excellent. So if you're into that, like, check her out for sure. But I used this bag for her business that I had to go and pick up some things from the studio at the theater that I need for this next semester. So this is going to be a little bit of an unboxing before I start working on the bonnet. So I hope, just indulge me because I need to unpack this thing. The first of which is the new calendar. This is probably the 20th calendar for the theater season that has come out as to how we think we're going to pivot to roll with pandemic restrictions and actors' equity restrictions and so forth. And there's been a series of proposals of things that we hoped would be possible to do that we always subsequently learned it was not going to be possible to do it. And so this is the most recent iteration of the calendar, but I'm sure it is not the last. But I'm glad to have it. This is the first one that I've been given a hard copy of. I was able to retrieve some things from my mailbox on campus. There were a couple of Christmas cards that I missed. Well, I didn't miss them, I guess. I've got them, but they're definitely later than they arrived past Christmas. And I see from this calendar, this new calendar, starting January 2021, it looks like classes are beginning on the 19th. That's later than usual. And we are hopefully taking a show called Edges of Time, which is a world premiere of a new script written by one of my colleagues, a professor named Jacqueline. Oh my God, I can't remember her last name. It just, it was right in my mind and then it just disappeared. So if you ever watch this, I'm super sorry I forgot your name just now. Anyway, she wrote a new script. It's a one-woman show about the life of a woman who lived here in the North Carolina Piedmont, as I understand it, who was part of the early days of the civil rights movement in the 60s, and I think this play takes place in 1962 because we had to build a period dress for it, presuming that we're going to go ahead with filming it because that's supposed to happen on the 22nd now. And that show, if Equity approves it, it's one woman. It's going to be filmed and then delivered as a video that you can watch. So we'll see if that happens. High hopes on this calendar right here. And then other things in here. Oh, I have, this is a length of PVC pipe, but it's also something on which you can do a dye effect called shibori by wrapping the pipe with your fabric and then binding it with cord in a spiral down the length of the pole. And it makes, if you do it correctly, it makes a pattern that's kind of reminiscent of zebra stripes or tiger stripes. You know, there's stripes that are not like striped fabric, but they're stripes like an animal has stripes. So I'm teaching dye class in the spring. I brought this one home. There's about, I don't know, 10 or 12 of these at work, and I only have 6 students in the class. So I figured I would be okay bringing one of these home in case I want to film a demonstration of that technique. So that's for the shibori project, which you could, the number of different techniques for creating shibori designs are, you know, there's dozens and dozens of ways to do it. Which, speaking of, I also brought home, another way that you can do it is to fold up the fabric, like think about fabric origami or like an accordion folded fan. You fold up the fabric and then press it in between some blocks and clamp it. That's what these nails are for, is so you can wrap string around them to fully press it in there, and the dye and then only accesses parts of the fabric. Shibori is the same technique that, like, when you see tie-dyed shirts, that sort of like Grateful Dead hippie tie-dye that became popular at the end of the 60s, that is technically a shibori technique, or, you know, the broader, shibori is the Japanese word for it. Bandhani is the Indian word for it. I think of it as occlusive techniques where you're preventing dye from accessing part of the fabric just by tying it or clamping it or stitching it and drawing the stitches up tight. So I brought home some blocks for folded and clamped shibori demonstrations, and these, I will probably do this, like, we don't get to shibori until halfway through the semester, so I will probably do this before that and then drop these back off at work so that if my students want to do something with it, they can. So I have that set of the rectangles, and I thought I brought another set of them. Ah, yes. Little triangles. Oh, there's still some thread tied onto that triangle. So that I can do a couple of different techniques. There are several more of these different shaped triangles and rectangles and so forth in the dye shop at work. I only brought a couple because I'm not going to demonstrate everything. It's graduate school. They need to figure it out on their own as well. But I do want to at least do a demonstration with a couple of different techniques. I have a power brick. This was something that Chris sent with me, my partner Chris sent with me in case my phone died while I was filming all these videos for the class. So that's not something I brought from work, but, oh, a headband. Well, that's useful. I can get my hair out of my face for the studio stream. That's almost, oh, here's one last thing, are some pre-val sprayers. So this is something that we won't get to this in my class until the last probably quarter of the semester, once we start doing surface design techniques beyond shibori and where you need, you know, a sort of artistic sensibility and some equipment. And these, if you're not familiar with them, I'm going to film a tutorial. That's why I brought them home. I'm going to film a tutorial on how to work with these, because I've heard some people call these the poor man's airbrush. It's not quite the same. You have but it is that's reasonable in that they are cartridges and jars that in combination turn any liquid into an aerosol that can be sprayed. And so, you would put your dye or your paint, in most cases I'm using textile paint that has been thinned out, or sometimes premixed airbrush paint, into this jar here, and take your lid off of it and screw your Preval cartridge on there. And then it's got an aerosol sprayer, just like sprays, like hairspray, like spray paint. So, there's one thing that's missing though. See, when I film this, I won't screw that up. You have this little plastic tube with a filter at the bottom that you put onto the bottom of your cartridge, because that's how it draws the paint up into the aerosol. Duh. So anyway, that's the fun of a live stream. You get to see the screw up and then the correction. So yeah, if I wanted to make an aerosol paint out of some thinned out acrylic in a custom color, which is often the way I'm using it, where we've mixed a paint that is the color that we need we want to spray a pattern onto a skirt hem with a stencil, let's say. Then I would make sure that the acrylic paint was thin enough that there was enough water present that it wouldn't clog this tube, but then I'd be able to spray it with this Preval sprayer. So that is a forthcoming video on the channel here in probably, I've made it, I'm really excited. I made a schedule for my channel for at least the first 4 months of 2020 as to what videos I'm going to film and release. And I'm not scheduling these studio streams because it's kind of contingent upon what happens with the theatrical shows that are on this calendar that are scheduled. Like if it's a studio stream day and I need to make some hats for a show that's getting filmed because we are sanctioned to do that, then it'll just be whatever happens. So I can't schedule the studio stream topics in advance as much as I can plan what videos I'm going to release. And so the Preval sprayer, and in fact probably these Shibori videos, I'll be filming the versions that are specific to my class, but then I will probably film more generalized ones for release on the channel. Now those won't be till probably late March, maybe. It kind of depends on how the semester unfolds, because I really have no idea. Like I know how I teach this class when we can all be on site and have access to the room, the dye room, and all of the equipment and ventilation and so forth that is in it. Safe work capacity though, only one person is allowed to work in the dye shop at any given time. For the majority of the projects, due to how much equipment we have and where it's placed. Like we have 2 dye vats, but they're right next to each other. So if 2 people are dyeing fabric in the vats, they're within 6 feet of each other. So that's a no-go. And the projects, like in a normal semester, it's not too much work for them to do. But I've already eliminated or cut back the requirements of some of these projects just due to the fact that they can't get into the space for the amount of time that they normally would. But I won't know if that's adequate until we really get the semester going, which, as I said, that's the first day of class. My first day of class is January 20th. So I still have, 3 weeks till that begins. But that's that bag is the fruits of my labor yesterday, which I now, can organize and figure out what I'm going to do with class-wise. But in terms of studio stream progress on the Regency bonnet, so here's this. And my camera angles are like, I can be hidden behind it on YouTube, or I can put it, well, let me position it for Instagram, because right now I have more people viewing on Instagram than I do on YouTube. And the people on YouTube, if they watch the studio stream after the fact, they're not really here to look at my face, right? They're here to look at this bonnet. So I talked a little bit last stream about how I was going to trim out this bonnet. And this is a proposed trim idea, a trim story that has been on the bonnet for a couple of days. And it's a lot more simplistic than I envisioned, because if you recall, I got these beautiful antique ribbons like this silk jacquard and this double-faced peach satin, these beautiful ribbons. But then I pinned out this story with just the minimal straw flower and this little green pseudo leaves. I guess last stream I talked about how to do this sort of ribbon leaf effect. I pinned this out, and let me take this off of here. I'm not in love with this feather spray as part of it. I'm hung up. Okay, hang on. There we go. Yes. So I just pinned this out on here, and I actually love the minimalism of it. Like, I'm almost set on this being the look, but I have one more idea. I want to pin out a little bit of ribbon loops. I don't even want to say a bow, because it's not going to be a bow per se, but it's going to be bow inspired, let's say, coming up from this. I want to pin that out and see what I think about it, but I'm 90% sure that it's going to be this, whether there are more ribbons or not involved. So this feather spray that I took off of the bonnet, this is an antique egret feather ornament that came in that donation earlier in the stream when I was talking about finding black sequins on my work table, and that being from some antique mourning bead work. This was also in the same box, this, and there was another beautiful feather ornament similar to this, but it was black, that came in that donation. And for one thing, okay, in the unboxing video, I talked about the sort of dubious ethics of working with these antique egret plumes, because unless things have changed since the last time I checked, egrets are an endangered species. And so if you have plumes of them, that's of questionable legality. Even if this bird, I mean, I can guarantee you this bird would have died of old age way before I came into possession of this thing. But it doesn't change the fact that, like, you don't want to promote the using of egret feathers in such a way that people are going to resume harvesting them from the birds. But even so, I received this thing, and I just briefly thought, oh, what would that look like on the bonnet if it just arced over like this, which admittedly, that is lovely. That is lovely. But in thinking about the purpose of this bonnet, which is, recollect, this is a teaching sample, let's say, for a lecture I'm giving in April of 2021 on millinery and Jane Austen, and millinery in the Regency era, and specific to Jane Austen, either herself or her characters. And in making this bonnet, I've kind of come to a conclusion that it is, if it were a bonnet for a character in a Jane Austen book or adaptation for the stage or for film, that it would be for the character of Charlotte in Pride and Prejudice, which, if you know that book, she's the one who winds up accepting the marriage proposal from the kind of nerdy and goofy reverend character, because she doesn't love him. She has a conversation with Elizabeth Bennet where she's basically like, no, of course I don't love him, but he makes a good living. I'm going to be well taken care of. So it's an economic choice. It's smart to marry this man. So she does. And in thinking that she is a person of such a practical nature at that time, where, you know, women can't get jobs. Women are beholden to their families or the men that they marry for everything. Financial support, you know, social standing, and so forth, that I can get behind the decision of Charlotte to marry the nerdy reverend. Like, it's a solid choice. It's like getting a degree in civil engineering. Like, you can get a job and you will make good money, right? You could also maybe love civil engineering, but even if you don't, I can see why you would be like, yes, but of course I'm going to major in it because I will be successful. And same kind of thing with Charlotte is, she marries the reverend because she wants to have a comfortable life. And this bonnet, I sort of envision it, like, obviously it's not going to be used in a theatrical adaptation or even a cinematic adaptation because of the depth of the brim. We've talked about that before, how this is an accurate copy of a bonnet from the time period, but that it is so much of a tunnel to the brim visor that you would never have it in a stage play or a film because you couldn't light the performer's face. And in the context of the Regency time period, that makes perfect sense because the purpose of the bonnet is to keep sun off of your face, and also, I guess, to, restrict your peripheral vision and further subjugate you if you want to get into, social sciences and feminist critique and stuff. But really, like, to go back to why I'm not putting this plume on this bonnet, it is partly because it's an egret plume, and I think that would be unethical. And I'll put it into our study collection so that I can show it to students and say, this is an egret plume. These birds are endangered. Do not use these feathers. So they know what they're looking at. But if I were to put it on this hat, it is also a level of expense and class. Like, this is even within the context of a time when everybody wears feathers on their hat, this is an expensive feather to put on your hat. And I don't know that there's a character in any of Jane Austen's books, and certainly not Jane Austen herself, who would have been able to afford this millinery ornament. It's certainly buying some lovely new ribbons, trimming out your hat with whatever the trendiest color combinations of the day are. I could buy all of that, but I would be hard pressed to believe that even Charlotte, after she marries the reverend, is in a financial position to own one of these, much less a bonnet that's trimmed out with it. So anyway, that's a lot of explanation for why I'm just not going to put that thing on this hat. And in fact, what I want to do today. So I have attached my little green, I think I did this in the last studio stream actually, is attach my beautiful vintage ribbon to my straw flower that I made a couple of streams ago. And I've left my my needle attached. Like I haven't knotted off the thread or anything, because once I figure out the placement of this, then I'm just going to sew it directly on using that same thread. Because I don't see this hat appearing in any kind of stage play. I think, or film. I think that what I've created here is a historical reproduction that ideally I'd like for it to just remain as it is, moving forward in its life, that it is an exact reproduction. Well, I hate to say exact, because how would I know? It's a close reproduction of bonnets of the period as it possibly can be, and its value, I guess, is going to be not as something that can get retrimmed, reworked, reworn in future by any number of performers. Its value is going to be something that my students, or if by the time I give this lecture I could give it in person, let's be real, that's not happening, but if I could, then the people who attended the lecture, who learned about Regency millinery, could try it on and see exactly how confined you feel, how restricted this bonnet brim feels. Like this is it's going to be, it already is, a beautiful form, a beautiful bonnet. But inside of here, my world is shrunk down. My world is very concentrated to just what's right ahead of me. And I don't have to turn too far before I can't see you in my peripheral vision, and you can't see me. This is a bonnet that's very easy to get mugged in. So what I intend to do, though, in pinning out trim, let me rewind. I struggled with which side I would put the flower on, because in contemporary millinery, you always put on a man's hat, a traditionally masculine hat, you always put the bow and the little feather on, say, the fedora, on the right or on the left side if the person is right-handed, because it is attached to, it's an artifact of the times when you are carrying a sword, and if you're right-handed, the sword's on your left hip, and you pull it out, and when you brandish your sword, you don't want to accidentally cut the feather off of your own hat, because that is not threatening. Like if you've seen I think it's the first of one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, where Jack Sparrow, they're having a sword fight and he cuts off Barbossa's feather, and that's funny. And as an audience, it's funny because he cut his feather off in the middle of this fight, but it's also funny because it's emasculating. And the removal of your plumage is not desirable. So milliners, hat makers, would always put it on the opposite side of someone's sword arm so they wouldn't accidentally cut it off, or they'd have to really go out of their way to cut it off. And the opposite is true for traditionally feminine hats, because other than in our dreams and our feminist reimaginings, there aren't a lot of women's sword fighting. So they'd always put the flower and the feather and stuff on the side where it's, in danger. It needs protection. So I argued with myself about whether I should put the flower on the left side, where it is it conveys subconsciously or directly to milliners who know that bit of history, it conveys some strength and self-possession and self-ownership. If if the flower is on this side, or what rather, in the time of Jane Austen, it would definitely be on the right side, because nobody has any, none of these middle class women who are her characters have any sort of self-possession at that time. So you will notice that I had pinned it onto the left side, which is, I guess what makes sense to me as, a former riot girl of the 90s, like you don't want to have that little bit of screw you to the patriarchy, I suppose. So I think, though, that in pinning out my next iteration of trim to decide, and I will decide in this stream, and hopefully, my goal is to decide and then stitch it on. Now, as we know, I always have these high hopes that never, I think I've actually finished everything I'd planned to do in a stream once, and I've been doing this since September, maybe. So it's good to have hopes, but it's also good to be realistic. So I think my goal, pin out what my next trim story is, decide, and then start finishing it. What's more likely to happen? I'll pin out this trim story and then I'll finish it in the next stream. So I want to take a few loops of this ribbon. Well, I'm going to do two. I'm going to do 2 loops of my pink ribbon, which this is just for aesthetics, because the fact that I'm taking these loops in the ribbon means I'm going to wind up with 2 different lengths of the tie section of the ribbon. So I would have to reposition this or I will have to reposition this if I choose to go with this configuration, so that I can more evenly distribute the length of the ties. So this tie will get shorter and this tie will get longer. I have 2 yards of this ribbon, so I have plenty if I choose to do this. But I don't know yet. I'm just experimenting aesthetically. And my other idea, besides, I guess I have a couple of ideas to look at today, is to use one or both of these other ribbons that I bought for this bonnet, the jacquard and then the double face satin that I love so much. The double face satin is the one from Hyman Hindler, which I really hope survives the pandemic, but I don't have super high hopes about that. If you missed that stream, Hyman Hindler was an antique ribbon dealer in the Garment District in New York City that, I know that my double-faced satin ribbon came from Hyman Hindler because I saw it in the images. I saw the end of the spool with their maker's mark or their company logo on the Etsy listing. So that's pretty good. I don't want there to be too much frou here. Like, I want to stick with the simplicity of it. But I do like the 2 loops of the ribbon sort of augmenting the placement of the flower. So this is a good potential trim. I don't think I normally will pin something out and sit with it for a few days, but I've been sitting with this without these loops, and I've been wishing there was something up above up above the flower itself that extended up towards the crown of the head, because from the research that I did, a lot of the millinery from this time period, you know, my research image of the hat that I was trying to make this from had its trims down here at the very, like almost over the ear. But that makes me think that hat was retrimmed, because that's not a trim orientation that I see in the fashion plates from the period. And it's often more up towards the top of, like, not necessarily right on top, symmetrically on, balanced on top, but it's definitely further up the arc of that join between the crown and the brim. So if I did this, I think I would want to move my, whether I do this with this pink ribbon or with maybe my double-faced satin or jacquard, I think I would want to move the concentration of trim further up on the bonnet, so that it was, instead of these loops and flower being right here, that they would be more up here. It was fascinating to research the fashion plates of this time and see, like, what were the hat designs and what were the hat trim stories that were being sold to women in this time period, like what was being presented as fashionable. And it was really fascinating to see where on the hat they were choosing to put their trims, because, you know, to a modern eye, I don't know, I see there are several milliners on both platforms. If you want to drop into the chat any philosophies that you have on determining where on an untrimmed hat you're going to locate the trim that you choose to put on it, because I tell my students that when they look at a hat that's untrimmed, like this is basically untrimmed, it's got this ribbon pinned out on it, that they should first listen to their instinct about, you know, where do you automatically think that this trim should go. And I think that most people, let me show you here, I think that many people, I don't want to say most people, but I think that many people would go with this. It's on the right side, it's low over the ear. And I don't have any reason for that other than it's where I tend to think we automatically expect the trim to be. And so, of course, put it there, look at it, see what you think about it, but then take it off and put it places where you would actually never think that it should go, and see what you think about it. So, like, what if this is a very Regency choice? This location of the trim, actually maybe with the green, with the green facing that way. So this positioning of the flower, like so many fashion plates that I looked at from this time period, you know, there would be like 6 bonnets, 8 bonnets on a spread where, you know, they're not even on heads. They're just sort of floating nebulously in space, like this millinery just hovering there. It'd be like 6 or 8 bonnets, and they would all have trim that was located up towards the crown of the head. Not directly on top of it, but much closer to it. And in fact, some of them would even have it fell off. some of them would even have the flowers and feathers located, failing at this pin, located further up the crown to where they're not even down here at the join from the brim to the crown. They would be up here near the tip of the crown. So this configuration here, which I think, okay, you can see it good on both Instagram and YouTube. This configuration is the most visually Regency accurate of however I could turn this out. Now, I'm not really drawn to this. I think that with this specific bonnet, one thing that makes it really beautiful is this line, the curve from the brim into the crown, that's not a sharp angle, you know, it's a slow sloping like a ski slope, you know, and I don't want to break that up. So I'm not going to put, you know, I'm not going to put my flower right here at the edge of the ski slope. You know, I am going to locate it a little bit further down. And I'm inclined to do something with one of these other ribbons. Like, I love this jacquard ribbon, so let me do some loops with it and see what I think about that. I mean, you know, it could be nice. So thank you for spending the last day of 2020 with me here on my studio stream. Oh, that's ugly. I really appreciate it. I don't know. I hope you all had, if you celebrate Christmas, I hope you had a lovely Christmas. We don't really celebrate hugely, but, you know, like, we're not a religious household, but we do tend to, in normal times, gather with family, which clearly was not possible this year. But my partner and I were able to Zoom with my mother and father. His mother and father are both deceased, but he does have a sister, and we texted with her a little bit. And I also spoke with an old friend from high school who is spending this pandemic quarantine with her mother and her adult son. I think he's like 26, 27 maybe. And not with her husband. She had moved out of her house to take care of her mom. Her mom is not ill with COVID, but also not in good health. And so I was glad to be able to talk with her a little bit. So I hope that if you are a celebrator of Christmas and you were able to visit with family, even virtually, and if you're not a celebrator of Christmas, then A+ for your tolerance of the Christmas season if you happen to live in the US or the UK, where, you know, they act like nobody is any other religion on earth or has any other holiday. Okay, so this one is going to require a bit more imagining, because I have a length of ribbon that I cannot cut off unless I plan to, you know, unless I plan to choose this. I don't know. I don't love it. You know, I love the ribbon, but just because I love the ribbon doesn't mean that the ribbon is right for this hat. I feel like I feel like I would be using it just for the sake of using it, and not because it really complements the look of the hat. It's possibly it's the jacquard nature of the ribbon. You know, the fact that it's a pretty ornate jacquard. I mean, there are several colors to it, and you know, there's peach and pink and green, and the flower vines and the stripes, and you know, there's a lot going on in this ribbon. And maybe this hat, there's a lot going on with straw flower, that's for sure. You know, aesthetically speaking, like this is a really, when you look at this flower, it's not like a restful thing to look at necessarily. It's a complex aesthetic ornament. So maybe what I need to do, if I'm going to not use my lovely pink taffeta, which that looked fine. I remember liking that, yes. But maybe my loops behind my flower are this double face peach satin. So, and you know, it is 1.5 inches width, same width as this pink taffeta here, which that could be some of it too. Is this, I think this is 1 1/4, this jacquard. The narrowness of it may be part of what I'm responding negatively to, that it's not as opulent visually as these other ribbons that are you know, a wider width. I mean, I think that certainly this double face satin, you know, the reflectivity of the satin just looks so lush and beautiful. Oh, I think I want to put that on here. Let's try a third trim story. Now that, like, I don't need to sit and live with the jacquard on here. Like, I already know. No, I don't want it. I've lived with the unadorned / egret adorned version of this long enough to know that I like it just fine. Let's see, let me hide that over there. And okay, I will turn this around and show it to you in just a moment. Yes. What do we think about this? I really like this. I really like this. Yeah, this could be it. Because I've got 2 different textures in the ribbon. I've got the reflectivity of this rich satin, and then I have the it's still specular, which means the light's reflecting off of it, but it's not quite so uniformly shiny, the taffeta. It's a little bit duller in its reflectivity. It's a different quality of shine, I suppose. So I'm inclined. I don't know. Maybe the extra ribbons are just too much. Maybe I really do just respond to the simplicity of this hat, with just the plain ribbon that you tie it on with, and then the plain flower. You know, maybe it really is just that simple, because I don't want to overwork it here. I really do want it to just, oh, there we go. to just be like a beautiful, not a simple bonnet. This is actually a very ornate bonnet. But it gives the impression of simplicity until you really look at it and really pay attention to things like these inserts of triple braided braid, 3-strand braid that are stripes here towards the exterior of the brim. It's very subtle until, if you recall, when you shine a light through it, and then that becomes like, here are these stripes. Yeah, I'm inclined to think that maybe this is what I'm doing with this bonnet. And of course, here we are, 5 minutes to 5 p.m. I got far enough to decide what I want to do, but I'm going to thread up a needle, but I'm from if you've attended any of these streams before, I'm not very adept at needle threading, so that's not going to happen very fast. So I will get far enough to prepare the thread to begin to sew the ornaments onto the bonnet. Oh, this is really jammed in here. Oh, maybe that's not. This is a new spool of thread. And I feel like perhaps, yep, I've got the wrong end of the thread. It's not the part that I can actually unspool. I don't think. Yes, there we go. Yeah, so there's a little thread sticking off of it. That's the opposite end of this thread, of course. So in terms of, like, we're about to have New Year's Eve, like here, I'm in North Carolina, which is a state in the U.S., and so right now it's almost 5 p.m. So we are looking at starting New Year's Eve here in a few hours. We'll be counting down to 2021. Some of you, I see there are at least a couple of you from parts east of here who are somewhat closer to the next year than I am. Put a comment in the chat if you're doing anything exciting for New Year's. I know that other nations in the world who have dealt more efficiently with this pandemic, that you might actually be able to safely attend a party or a public event. Here we are planning on our plans are very simple. We will not be staying up till midnight to ring in the new year. We usually go to bed about 9:30 or 10 these days. I'm a former night owl, but definitely not anymore. But in terms of plans, my partner Chris did buy a super nice bottle of champagne that we're gonna drink. Well, we're gonna open and drink. So I'm looking forward to that. A little bit of trepidation about it though, because sometimes, in my experience, sometimes you try something that is expensive and you think it's going to be great because it's got this great reputation, and then you taste it and you're like, oh, why does this cost so much? So it's not super expensive. Like I think he spent like $50 or $60. Like it's not like one of those $200 plus bottles of champagne, but anyway, that's our plan, is to have a glass of champagne and go to bed before it's ever even the new year. So I have now threaded my needle and I'm ready to sew on my trim that I've decided upon, and it is time to end my stream. So thank you so much for spending the last an hour of the last day of 2020 in my studio stream, and I will probably, my plan is to do this for the indefinite future, because I'm going to be teaching in the spring, and maybe some of my streams will have something to do with dyeing, but they will probably have to do with making hats for shows that the theater is planning on filming, assuming they get permission to do that. So please join me every Thursday afternoon. This was postponed because I had an interview this afternoon in my normal studio stream time, but I will be reverting to the 3 p.m. on Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursdays, each Thursday, and I'll probably be working on, like, I may finish this before next Thursday, but I have some exciting black fur felt that I want to do some of these flat fur felt hat patterns with, and lots of other exciting millinery on the horizon. We're doing As You Like It at the theater, and it's set in 1923, I believe, in Oklahoma. And so I've seen the designs, and there's some really exciting early 1920s bridal headgear, and Touchstone the clown is a rodeo clown, so he has a cowboy hat which may or may not have funny hair or sideburns or whatever, and I'm hoping to be working on some of those in the stream, but it will really kind of depend on the fitting schedule and so forth. Anyway, have a great New Year's, and I'll see you in 2021. I'm so excited about that. Let me get up here and